Everybody, and welcome to the channel. HTM here, and in this video we'll be reviewing every class currently available in the Elder Scrolls Online and how they rank for solo gameplay. And first of all, yes, you can solo much of the content in ESO, even some content meant specifically for groups like world bosses, 4-player dungeons, and even the new Infinite Archive. And playing solo is a great option for when you can't find a group, have limited playtime, or are looking to farm some gear. But some classes do this better than others, which is why I made this video. So if you want to know the best possible solo classes for both stamina and magicka builds in ESO, make sure to watch all the way till the end. And let's start with our first class, the Stamina Warden. The Stam Warden comes limping into this list in the C tier, and while many other classes on this list have greatly improved over time, the Stamina Warden seems to have gotten worse and is stuck with just a few limiting options in terms of playstyle. But let's start off with the good things, which is their AoE skill, Scorch. This can be morphed to either Subterranean Assault or Deep Fissure, and even though it's a magicka skill, Deep Fissure is my preferred morph in this case, because it doesn't cost much and it applies two great debuffs, Major Breach and Minor Breach, giving your build around 9,000 armor penetration in an AoE, which is fantastic for solo content. But unfortunately, the Stamina Warden goes downhill pretty quickly from there, with expensive skills, a lackluster spammable, and terrible sustain. Let me show you one example of what I mean. The Warden skill, called Winter's Revenge, is a pretty good AoE damage over time ability in theory, but for some reason the skill only improves for builds that use a Destruction Staff. This seems like an odd choice, as there's literally no other skill in the game that I can think of that does this, and that pretty much bars you from using the skill completely on a true stamina build. Another skill, Arctic Blast, is also very powerful for its healing potential and stun, but costs well over 4,000 magicka, which means you can't depend on it on a stamina build again. But the major sustain issue for Warden is that their main recovery skill, called Bullnetch, only recovers stamina and no magicka, which makes it difficult to use healing or utility skills on your stamina build. I mean, classes like Nightblade, Dragon Knight, Necromancer, and even the Arcanist all have sustain skills that recover both stamina and magicka, so I'm not sure why the Warden is stuck without it, but it's very noticeable. And for all of these reasons, unfortunately, Stamina Warden is our only C-tier solo class. The Magicka Necromancer has probably changed the most out of every class on this list recently, with their main damage ability, Stalking Blast Bones, being completely reworked into a buff effect rather than a damage ability. Now, in many cases, this will result in your AoE damage capabilities going down slightly. Unfortunately, the Necromancer is also one of the most difficult classes to play in ESO, due to its short buff durations and the need to manage corpses for things like healing and even sustain. However, there is one playstyle that I want to mention here that is still extremely fun on the Magicka Necromancer, and it's actually more powerful than ever, and that's playing as a heavy attack build. Now you see the changes to Stalking Blast Bones actually improve this playstyle by buffing your dot damage even further, which is one of the main components of doing a Lightning Staff heavy attack in ESO. So right off the bat, you get a major bonus to your heavy attack damage on the Necromancer that no other class has access to. Now, any Necro build can also use the skill called Ruinous Scythe, which instantly sets nearby targets off balance. And guess what? Off balance enemies take more damage from heavy attacks. So while a typical Magicka Necro build may feel clunky, the heavy attack version is actually one of the strongest in the game and helps to bring an otherwise struggling class up significantly. The Stamina Dragon Knights focus on damage over time, strong passives, and access to some healing over time make it a decent choice for those looking to play primarily solo in ESO. Let's start with the good, which, as I mentioned, is their focus on damage over time. Dot builds are some of the easiest to play in ESO, and it's very easy to stack dots on this class with great skills like Noxious Breath, which also provides the very important Major Breach armor debuff. Then you can then choose Venomous Claw for ramping damage or Burning Embers for an extra heal over time, which is helpful. And speaking of healing, choosing the Cauterize morph here will provide some clutch heals when needed. The Stamina Dragon Knight Sustain has been upgraded recently as well, so that you now gain 1,000 magicka and stamina when proccing a poison or burning status effect, which is quite easy to do. And I also like the Hardened Armor morph, which was also recently upgraded with an improved shield size. Speaking of shields, the Ferocious Leap ultimate is highly recommended for solo builds, as it comes with great damage, a stun, and a massive shield at a relatively low ultimate cost. But on to downsides, which for me comes mostly, one of the main problems is that if you decide to focus your stam DK on dots, you'll have tons of different timers to mess with. For example, your class dots have extremely long durations of 20 seconds plus, but that doesn't match with skills like Cauterize or Flames of Oblivion at 15 seconds, Endless Hail at 14 seconds, and so on, so oftentimes your rotation becomes a bit jumbled. Also on the downside, the Dragonite spammable is a complete mess in my opinion, with two options. One completely stamina based that does one AoE hit and then 3 single target hits, and then a sort of hybrid Flame Lash ability that costs some magicka and some stamina. Nothing really flows well here, so you're probably better off just using Brawler in between your dots, but overall I would call this a B tier solo class. And before we move on, a quick word from today's video sponsor, Factor 75. Factor is the perfect solution for busy gamers like you and me who want to eat healthy but don't always have the time or the right supplies. Factor's no-hassle prepared foods make sure you always have something nutritious on hand, like their prepared smoothie or keto shake for a quick snack, or heat and eat chef-quality meals in just 2 minutes with no prep and no cleanup. And with plenty of meal preference options like keto, calorie smart, vegan, and vegetarian, and more than 27 meal options each week, there's something for everyone, and you can add or reduce the number of meals you receive depending on what you want, or even skip a week if needed. The Factor has definitely come in clutch for me this week as I was preparing and testing out all the ESO builds you saw in this video. That level of convenience when things get busy is definitely appreciated. Factor can help you avoid fast food and ordering in to make a healthier choice with no-nonsense delicious food that takes the guesswork out of eating well, so you never have to opt for something that isn't good for you. Get 50% off your first Factor box and free wellness shots for life using my link. That means you can choose 2 free wellness shots from the 3 available flavors for every order while you are an active subscriber. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone, and thanks again to Factor for sponsoring this video, but let's get back into it. Next up we have the Stamina Templar. Now Templars do have one of the best spammable abilities in the game, and while the stamina morph of this skill called Biting Jabs is not as powerful as the magicka version which heals you, the fact that this skill can still hit multiple targets as well as single targets, does multiple successive hits to proc effects, and also applies your major damage buff in this case, helps the Stamina Templar have one of the simplest rotations in the game, which is a definite plus. You also have access to plenty of heals with your off resource, whether you choose Honor the Dead for burst heals or Living Dark for a more heal over time approach. The Stamina Templar does feel extremely tanky, which is great. Templar can also shred through enemies by combining Biting Jabs with other skills like Two-Handed Brawler, Dual-Wield Deadly Cloak, or Bow's Endless Hail, and then easily get back to full stamina using the skill Repentance, which restores stamina and health for each corpse on the ground. Now this is especially great for fast runs through Maelstrom Arena, Infinite Archive, or just grinding experience, as you can quickly dispatch groups of enemies and then restore yourself back to full health and stamina with this one skill. But as you can probably tell in terms of weakness, there just aren't a whole lot of stamina-based Templar abilities to choose from, so you'll need to supplement your build with other stamina skills like Weapon skills, Fighter's Guild, Alliance War skills, particularly Razor Caltrops, if you want access to Major Breach, because there's no way to get this on the class. Also, the fact that your best sustain tool depends on having corpses on the ground means that fighting bosses without any ad waves can become challenging to sustain when you can't use Repentance. The Magicka Dragonite class in solo content can feel a bit awkward at times, especially if you try to use their main spammable ability called Molten Whip, which actually costs magicka and stamina at the same time, which is pretty strange. However, I think if you transform your Mag DK into a heavy attack build using a lightning staff, then the class actually performs better and is extremely easy. For one thing, their damage buff called Molten Armaments also comes with a built-in buff to heavy attack damage. This is called the Empower buff, and it makes those heavies do significantly more damage, which is great. The heavy attack playstyle also works well with the Dragonite's other damage skills, which tend to be damage over times as well. Now in terms of healing, both Burning Embers and Cauterize should do a decent job for your Mag DK of keeping alive. And remember that even your ultimate can heal you back due to the Battle Roar passive, which restores resources when you use an ultimate. But overall, the Magicka Dragonite just feels a bit lackluster, and I can't quite put my finger on it. However, they do remain a very solid B-tier choice for those interested in the fiery playstyle. We're on to the A tier next, and the Stamina Necromancer is definitely improved over its Magicka counterpart due to its Blast Bones morph still dealing a lot of AoE damage, plus all the other damage options that you can bring in via the weapon skills, particularly Two-Hander and Dual Wield. And with the Necro's focus on greater dot damage, these skill lines synergize incredibly well on the Stamina Necromancer, helping to increase your damage and survivability over what Mag Necro can do. The Necromancer Colossus Ultimate is also fairly good for solo content, and I recommend the morph that stuns enemies, as this will be great for clearing through ad waves and trash packs. Don't forget skills like Spirit Guardian are excellent for survivability, and all the options that you have on the Stamina Necromancer to deal damage with stamina skills while healing and buffing using magicka skills makes sustain actually pretty easy on this class, especially compared to magicka Necro. However, short-term buff timers and the clunkiness of corpse management still keep the Necromancer class out of the top tier in my opinion. You still need corpses to power many of your abilities, and some skills you can't even cast until you have a corpse on the ground, so some practice and refining your rotation is definitely needed on this class, but once you get it down, it can be amazing. The Stamina Nightblade is definitely moving up in my opinion, thanks to several buffs to their core abilities in recent patches. Now, the Stamina Nightblade is most well known for being a single target assassin. This is because their main DPS skill called Surprise Attack only does single target damage. They also have powerful single target execute skill called Killer's Blade, the bow proc Relentless Focus, and even the recently buffed ultimate skill Incapacitating Strike. All of these obviously do single target damage. So if you like that assassin style of focus DPS, annihilating single targets, then the Stamina Nightblade is definitely for you. But this class's strengths also come in the form of utility, healing, and sustain. For example, one of the best skills in the Nightblade kit you should invest in right now is the sustain skill Siphoning Strikes. Now, either morph is a great option, providing lots of paths of healing and tons of bonus magicka and stamina sustain, which makes the class feel amazing. And for more passive healing, I also recommend slotting Swallow Soul somewhere on your bar, even on a stamina build, as you can basically treat this as a 10-second heal over time, and it does scale with your highest offensive stats. A few other recommendations I have for Stamina Nightblade solo builds is use a two-handed weapon on your primary skill bar with the Brawler skill slotted. This is a powerful damage shield that will give those healing over time effects a chance to catch up before you take too much damage. And for a great emergency heal and stun, definitely check out the Siphoning ultimate skill called Soul Tether, as this can get you out of some tricky situations. But all in all, the Stamina Nightblade has vastly improved over the years, has gotten consistent buffs, and even easier to play, a solid A-tier entry in my opinion. So a new entry this year obviously is the Arcanist class, and I'm going to start off with the Magicka Arcanist, which is quite good when it comes to solo play, but slightly more challenging when it comes to rotation compared to the Stamina counterpart, which we'll get to in just a minute. But the Arcanist class does have literally the best spammable attack in the game called Pragmatic Fate Carver. You can use this on both Stamina and Magicka builds, and this deals damage in a huge area in front of you while also giving you a large damage shield. And don't worry about recent nerfs, the shield is still huge, a very usable skill, and you should also combine this with a skill called Chakram Shields on the Magicka Arcanist, which generates Crux and gives you a shield as well. And basically the way this works is that you want to build up to 3 Crux stacks, and then you cast your main Fate Carver ability to boost its damage. Now, the only issue I have with this class really is that its other main skill called Tentacular Dread, which debuffs enemies, causing them to take more damage, also requires Crux to make it more effective. This makes the rotation more complicated than the Stamina Arcanist rotation, because you need to build up to 3 stacks of Crux, then cast the Tentacle, then build up another 3 stacks of Crux, then cast your Beam, and so on. But once you get the hang of this, it shouldn't be a huge issue, and the Arcanist class brings so much more to the table, like their amazing buffs, including Arcanist Domain, which gives you minor courage and all 3 minor recovery buffs at the same time, while also healing you as you stand in its giant circle. Plus, the Arcanist skills absolutely look and sound amazing, making the class just extremely fun to play, making this a solid A-tier choice for soloists. The Magicka Nightblade has been improving as of late, but it's just missing out on S-tier still in my opinion. Now on the plus side, it's very easy to survive on the Magicka Nightblade, due to their amazing healing options. I mean, their main spammable called Swallow Soul heals you back for a percentage of the damage done, and those heal ticks are huge. Plus, their ultimate skills are pretty fantastic. I mean, you can use the Soul Harvest ultimate here, along with the Nightblade's multiple passives that focus on ultimate generation, to become an absolute machine when it comes to pumping out ultimates. And their AoE damage potential is pretty good with skills like Twisting Path and Sap Essence. The Nightblade Sustain also got recently upgraded. I mentioned this on the Stamina Nightblade with the Siphoning Strike skill and its morphs, making the Nightblade class potentially the best sustain class in the game this year, depending on your playstyle. However, Nightblades are a bit more complex when it comes to rotation, due to powerful skills like Merciless Resolve, which require you to stack light attacks in order to get a bonus proc. You may also have so many good skills that bar space can actually become a challenge on the Nightblade, but other than that, this class remains a solid choice in the A tier and is especially good for more experienced players that can nail down a slightly more complex rotation. The Magicka Warden does much better than its stamina counterpart, and I mean, it's not even close really. For one thing, the magic-based Warden skills seem to be just a lot better, including Deep Fissure, which we mentioned for damage and penetration, Arctic Blast for healing and a stun, and we already talked about Winter's Revenge, which actually improves with a Destruction Staff equipped, so pretty much a no-brainer here. The Magicka Warden's spammable attack also, interestingly, is much better than the stamina version, as this can buff you by up to 400 weapon and spell damage, which is absolutely insane. Combine this with the Betty Net for Magicka Recovery and a few heavy attacks here and there, and Sustain is also much better for the Magicka Warden. But speaking of heavy attacks, this is actually one of my favorite ways to play the Magicka Warden, and it works particularly well as a basic 1-bar setup. Combine Cliff Racer and Deep Fissure for damage, Arctic Blast for healing, along with the massive heavy attack damage potential of a Lightning Staff, and you've got a seriously easy build for solo content that is very powerful. Magicka Warden, a solid A tier choice, which plays more like an A+ with a heavy attack build. Up next is the Stamina Sorcerer. Now, for solo gameplay, the Stam Sorc can offer a strong combination of self-healing, mobility, AoE damage, and sustain. Sorcerers shine in solo content thanks to their skill Critical Surge, which passively heals you once every second as long as you're dealing critical damage to your enemies. So make sure to keep this in mind and wear sets that focus on improving your critical chance rating, and use the Thief Mundus Stone. Another great skill that sorcerers have access to is Hurricane, which deals increasingly strong AoE damage over time, while also giving us our major armor buff and some extra speed. Abound Armaments is another interesting skill that summons daggers you can throw at enemies, while also providing a big bonus to your max stamina and giving you access to some great Daedric summoning passives. And keep in mind, you can even use the Magicka DPS skill Crystal Fragments, because this now procs on any ability, and the cost is low enough for even stamina builds to use. But that brings us to the downside of this class in my opinion, which is that outside of these 3 to 4 skills, there's really not much in the class toolkit that are actually stamina based. So rather than feeling like a sorcerer who can use bladed weapons, you mostly feel like a member of the Fighters Guild with the few sorcerer buffs left over. That's because Stam Sorc generally plays best with 3 to 4 Fighters Guild abilities on the front bar, including Silver Shards as a main spammable, because the sorcerer spammable crystal weapon just is not as good as it used to be. But if you can overlook the lack of stamina-focused class skills and you don't mind substituting a few others, the Stamina Sorcerer is extremely easy to play and powerful in solo content, nearly tipping over into the S tier. But speaking of S tier, this is it, the best solo classes in ESO, and we're starting with the Magicka Templar. The Magicka Templar has always been S tier in my opinion, thanks to their strong defensive passives, great AoE damage, and their ability to stack multiple heal over times to help them survive basically anything. Templar is all about healing, and most of their damaging abilities can also heal you back at the same time, similar to the Magic Nightblade, but their main difference is that their spammable puncturing sweep is AoE rather than single target, so you can easily mow down groups of enemies, all while getting healed back at the same time. Now you can also combine this with other healing effects like Purifying Light or Channeled Focus for an absolute flood of healing, which makes the Templar so powerful. Even the Magicka Templar's Execute skill, Radiant Glory, heals you back as you deal damage, making sure that you always have healing coming in no matter what you're doing. But other than that, the Magicka Templar can be extremely easy to play, which is another reason I rank it so highly. Simply lay down your ground effects and then use Puncturing Sweep all day long. Other skills like Solar Barrage actually travel with you and damage enemies in the area, which is extremely helpful. But a few extra skills you want to make sure to grab include Elemental Drain for the extra penetration and Magicka Recovery, as well as the Destruction Staff Ultimate Fiery Rage or Shooting Star from the Mages Guild, but overall you can't go wrong with the Magicka Templar in solo content. But the Stamina Arcanist is actually the best solo build for stamina classes in ESO by far, placing it firmly in the S tier for this list. Now there are several reasons for this, but one of my favorite is their ability to use almost nothing but class skills. This is very different from most other stamina classes like the Stamina Sorcerer, for example, which are more dependent on weapon and guild skills and even Alliance War skills to fill in gaps. But the Arcanist toolkit is amazing, and many skills change their cost dynamically depending on your highest resource, which makes it so easy to put together a true stamina-focused Arcanist build instead of just a generic melee fighter build. Now, in terms of damage, the Arcanist has far and away the best spammable ability in ESO, that being Pragmatic Fate Carver. We already talked about this. Gives you a huge damage shield while you also deal AoE damage, which is purely insane. This opens up a lot of possibilities, such as running dual-wield daggers on your front bar for more crit chance, because you don't have to worry about a shield, so you can skip on Brawler or Carve. But the rest of the toolkit is also amazing and synergizes really well. For example, Cephaliarch's Flail roots enemies in place so you can line them up for your Fate Carver beam, while also building up Crux so that beam does more damage, and also healing you to keep your health topped off in between beams. This rotation is simpler than the Magicka Arcanist rotation and also more effective. Your class armor ability also generates Crux and debuffs enemy armor at the same time, which I love. And the Arcanist damage buff called Recuperative Treaties also provides both Magicka and Stamina Sustain. The class ultimates are also ridiculously strong, so make sure you use both the Herald of the Tome ultimate and especially Sanctum of the Abyssal Sea, which is amazing for survival. But that leads us to our final S tier class, the Magicka Sorcerer. Now, Magsorc has been the peak of solo builds in ESO for a long time, and it's actually gotten better as of late due to some recent buffs by the developers. So what makes the Sorcerer so good? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to shields, passive healing, and passive damage. And when set up correctly, and especially as a heavy attack build, the Magicka Sorcerer is just the easiest class to play in the game by far. Let's take pets for example. Even if you forget to press the button to engage your pet, they will still do damage for you no matter what, and they have some pretty strong and useful abilities, like the Massive Burst heal from Twilight Matriarch or the stun from the Volatile Familiar. Then you have the Sorcerer's shield called Hardened Ward, which was already amazing, but is now by far the best shield in the game because it now also comes with a built-in heal, which to me is insane. I'm not even sure why they added this, but it is super helpful for solo content, so make sure to take advantage. And speaking of healing as a sorcerer, this class obviously has access to the best passive healing skill in the game, Critical Surge. We already talked about this on Stamsorc. So as long as you keep the buff active, you will heal yourself every second when you're doing damage. So the simplest build on the Magsorc is simply throwing on some pets, then buff with Critical Surge, and use your heavy attack to deal damage while casting your shield in between. And you basically cannot die, which makes this an S tier for solo content. But that has been our ESO best solo class tier list. Let me know what you think I got right, and especially what I got wrong down in the comment section below. And while you're there, please crush that like button so YouTube knows to share this video with others. If you'd like to support the channel further, make sure to check out our channel membership, where our Tier 2 Elite Squad members get access to even more unique and off-meta solo builds, like our unkillable Stamina Necromancer Death Knight build, which you saw in this video. You can click on that join button down below for more information. But as always, I hope you're doing well, stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.